Hi everyone, welcome back to Misinformation in Science and Society. Here to listen, not to judge. I'm Annie, and today with us we have Peter McCullough, who is an astronomer. Hi.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Glad to be here. This is a very important topic you've picked up.
Thank you.
I don't know what the answers are, but good for
I-
you for trying. I mean, there's a lot undoubtedly being written, and there's probably many PhD theses that are being written and will be written, and you bit off a big topic here.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for this opportunity. I'm really happy to be here too. Um, so should I introduce myself or do you want to introduce yourself first?
Well, why don't you say a little bit about yourself and what you're doing here?
Okay. I'm Annie. I'm a rising junior. Um, and then I did this project because I kind of noticed a lot of misinformation, especially.
You froze.
Oh,
Yeah, hopefully the internet's good enough for us to be able to do this. I don't know whether it might be on my end or your end, but everybody's familiar with how things don't work anymore,
mm,
or
is it
never
working
did.
now?
But anyway,
Yeah.
let's keep going. Did it freeze for you also or not?
No, it was working for me.
Okay, very good.
Yeah. So I started this project because I noticed a lot of misinformation, especially during COVID and being on social media. I noticed a lot of that, so that's why I did this. And then outside of that, I I play piano and viola. I guess those are my hobbies, and I'm thinking of going to something related to biology in the future, so STEM related. Kind
Yeah, good. And where do you live? Where are you broadcasting from today?
I live in the northern suburbs of Chicago,
I see.
so yeah.
Well, I'm speaking to you from Baltimore, Maryland, my home,
Hmm.
which is suffering the heat.
Oh.
Anyway, I'm Peter McCullough. I'm an astronomer. I have made a career of astronomy since the 1980s.
Hmm.
Uh, I currently work at an institution that helps run space telescopes, the Hubble and the Webb, and nothing I say here reflects the official opinions of any of the institutions to which I am affiliated. And I disavow any claims to that effect.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
I'm speaking to you on a Saturday on my own time.
Hmm.
And again, my opinions are my own.
Of course. So I'm kind of curious, why did you choose to be an astronomer?
Yeah, I think it was because as a young teen, I still remember, and that I guess this was a formative moment. I didn't necessarily recognize it at the time,
Hmm.
but the sun had gone down. My father and I were out in the driveway, and he pointed out a bright star-like object off in the west, I guess it would have been.
Uh-huh.
And he said, "Well, that's Jupiter." And I said, "Well, how do you know that's Jupiter?" And he said,
Hmm.
"Well, it looks about the right brightness and it's in about the right position. So it has the right color. I mean, yeah, that looks like Jupiter to me." And so then I got interested in building telescopes again by a chance encounter that must have happened, I guess, around the same time. I went to my grandfather's house and somehow was rooting around in his or her, I hope it was his sock drawer. And I found a piece of glass about 6 inches in diameter and about 1 inch thick
Uh-huh.
that was inscribed something like Jim's lens. Well, it wasn't a lens, it was a mirror that had not yet been coated with aluminum. And I asked, could I have this? And they said, well, your father made that when he was your age. And yeah, I guess so, sure, take it. And so I built a telescope around that, and I still have that. And I used the telescope in my own backyard. And I think it probably gave my father some pride that he had started this. He ground that mirror and polished it and then didn't do anything with it. And then I did. And maybe the next generation will do, I don't know what with it. Anyway, that made me go to college with the idea that, well, I like astronomy. It's interesting. It seems like it has a lot of potential for discovery, which is really what drives me. I just love that idea of being sort of one of, or maybe even the first person ever to witness something kind of significant and important and interesting. And I've had a few occasions like that in my life, and they are special. It's really wonderful. And I went to college with the idea of becoming an astronomer unless something else caught my fancy more, and math almost did, but didn't. I felt I was really not intellectually adequate enough to make math a career. It's just really hard to push the boundaries of math compared to you point a telescope, you might just get lucky and discover something. I mean, it's also true that, what's that saying? Luck favors the prepared or something like that. You make your own luck. And that's certainly true. You can win the lottery just by buying the ticket, but it helps to, in the real world, it helps to study hard, work hard,
Yeah.
be lucky, and do well with other people.
hmm Yeah, that's a really cool and like inspiring story. So I saw that you like I think you co-founded the XO project. And that's like really cool. And I saw you had like several discoveries, I think six. Could you talk more about that? Like I think that's really cool.
Yeah, that's sort of been probably my most important contribution to astronomy. And it was really rather small. When you asked me for an interview, I was like, why would you want to interview me? There's plenty of people that are more interesting and capable and accomplished than I am. But I did have this idea, and I was well positioned to found and run for about a decade a project I called the XO project, which was just a whimsical play on words. X and O didn't stand for anything. It just sounded like XO, which is short for extrasolar. And so when we found planets, they would be exoplanets. And that was, to my mind, humorous. We found a few and we did it quickly. And then better funded, larger programs made ours obsolete. There were two that come to mind: HAT, Hungarian Astronomical Telescope or something like that,
Mm.
and WASP, Wide Angle Survey for Planets, I think. And then TESS made all of that obsolete. TESS is the Transiting Exoplanet Survey Satellite. And it just, swooped up everything. All those other projects are just totally obsolete now, essentially. And it commoditized the discovery of exoplanets by the transiting technique. That is, that the planet passes in front of the star and the star's total light dims by a tiny fraction, like 1% or less.
Okay.
And it's been very prolific, very important technique. allows a lot of follow-up uh, studies to be done, many of which have been done with Hubble and are now being done with the Webb.
Mhm.
So it's been a really a great run since about the year 2000. So it's been more than 20 years, very satisfying to work in this field. And it's exploded. It's been an enormous growth industry,
Mhm.
justifiably so. And probably has another 10 to 20 years, good run to it until things just like all things,
Yeah.
it'll become a situation of diminishing returns where you have to put in extra large effort to get a little bit further along. And probably I'll be retired long before that happens.
Yeah. That's really cool. So do you think there's like misinformation within the field of astronomy?
Yeah, there's misinformation in every field. I
Mhm.
remember, I don't know if you would remember, but my PhD advisor um, wisely waved his hand at his bookshelf, which was much larger than this bookshelf, and was wall to wall filled with the journals. This was back when
Uh-huh.
they would send you a printed volume every month, and then it became every 2 months, and then it became 3 a month. And um, so he had this wall of the Astrophysical Journal, and he waved his hand at it with me sitting there soaking this up. He said, 90% of this is wrong. And we already know it's wrong.
Mhm.
So get the data right. That's what matters. The
Mhm.
interpretation will be wrong
Mm.
and it'll work itself out over time. That's called science. Um, so whether it's misinformation, I guess what he was describing was misinterpretation.
Mm.
And that's just the way it is. We make mistakes. We try to correct them. Other people point out our mistakes and give a
Mhm.
better interpretation. I mean, astronomy is not experimental in general. It's an observational science where we just sort of look and then
Yeah.
we tell a story about what we see.
Mhm.
Um, so it's very open to multiple interpretations. And there is some element of like an interpretation might produce a hypothesis, and then you get more observations, and they might invalidate that hypothesis, or they might sort of be consistent with that hypothesis, and then you make another hypothesis and keep making more observations, better observations.
Okay.
But I think astronomers are also human,
Mhm.
and we are susceptible, just like every other human,
Yeah.
to um, mistakes that are of a human nature
Mhm.
that are harmful to science and to other people. And we've suffered a lot the last few years because of that. And I would say largely because of, uh, not just, but largely related to social media.
Mhm.
Um, One of the major sort of philosophical differences that should be pointed out in your topic is the difference between misinformation and disinformation.
Mm.
Here, I'm going to say the only difference between those two is intent.
Uh-huh.
A person producing disinformation knows it's wrong, but has
Mhm.
some incentive in getting other people to believe it, at least enough to propagate it further,
Mhm.
and doesn't care that it's obvious, or maybe it isn't obvious, but doesn't care that it can be shown to be wrong. They care to convince enough people fast enough that it sort
Mhm.
of blossoms and causes whatever trouble or whatever they're trying to create. And that's much more insidious and difficult to deal with.
Mhm.
Misinformation, yeah, that's okay. But if your intentions, if everybody's intentions are good, you still can have problems, as well your series of interviews will discuss. But if you have people out there, and you certainly do have people out there purposely trying to deceive other people, that's harder to combat. I mean, we expect it in politics, we expect it of spies, some criminal elements we shrug and go, well, of course they're going to do that. But to have other scientists doing this is very destructive to morale and trust. In fact, trust is the key point here. If we value truth, well, that's good. But what do we really value that's more foundational than truth? That is trust. Because truth is being right or wrong. As my advisor said, 90% of this is wrong, but nobody gets upset about the fact that it's wrong. We're going to correct it. It'll work out. But if you don't trust your colleagues, and in particular, if you don't trust the system to figure out what's true and what isn't, that's very harmful to morale. And good people will say, I'm just not going to play the game if it's not fair. I'm just not going to. I'm going to go into art or some other creative outlet. And we suffer a lot, I think, from that now, in that people that would otherwise choose to be productive, good, helpful astronomers or scientists, I think are going to choose other careers. You know, if you choose a different career, then that's one less person that's helping out figure out what's right and what's wrong in all this. So I would say disinformation is much more of a concern, I would argue, than misinformation, although misinformation is also a big issue. And it's primarily due to technology. I mean, technology amplifies everyone's power. And in particular, it empowers small groups of people, even individuals, to do good or to do evil. And the web is one technology that works in the intellectual domain of communication between people. And the web is very powerful and very vulnerable to this disinformation, or if you choose to limit yourself only to misinformation, that's also true, that a well-meaning person can read something and go, wow, good. And then they share it, and then this viral impact transmits much faster than COVID-19 ever will. I mean, and it's not new, right? I mean, Mark Twain said, I won't be able to get the quote right off the top of my head, but he said something like, a lie can go all the way around the world while the truth is still putting on his pants. So it's always been true that rumors and stuff like that, they get around. And they get around faster now to a lot more people. So I don't know what the answer is. For me, personally, the answer is I don't believe basically anything I read, especially on social media, unless I know the person personally. Now, I choose not to use social media much, and I only have a tiny number of friends. And, you know, if somebody writes something on the internet, I'll believe the argument if I can read the argument and feel like I understand it. But if they're presenting some observation, say, I've got to go find a more reputable source for that publication about the observation than just somebody who's a friend of a friend of a friend on social media. That I know that I will not believe any of that, because it can very easily be misinformation of one sort or another, or disinformation. And I hope that we'll go through a fad or phase here where everybody will learn that you just can't trust anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
I have to find trustworthy sources of information and believe those. And that's true to some extent. It's not been nearly as successful as the elimination of spam. You're probably too young to have experienced this, but in the 1990s, our email boxes were being inundated with spam, and is usually some form of pornography.
Uh-huh.
It was just, you had to search through your email to find the literal ones that you got from a colleague or a friend.
Mm-hmm.
And then that all went away. The technology arms race won. The filters were able to identify spam. And even though apparently it's zooming around the internet, lots of stuff is all being transmitted, it's all being filtered out, and you don't have to look through your email inbox trying
Yeah.
to find the legitimate emails. So
Mm-hmm.
that's an arms race that was won by technology. I hope that there's something that could be done for disinformation and misinformation, but I don't see it. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe somebody will figure it out. I hope so.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I said quite a bit there.
Yeah, no, yeah, that was like good advice to just like think twice about like information you read and stuff like that. So you said like misinformation, like disinformation can be like really damaging. What do you think like the worst type of like or like disinformation, I guess, is like what it would be like about?
Hmm. Well, I don't worry too much about it in science. It's
Mm-hmm.
there, but science is pretty much self-correcting, at least in the past it has been. And I think it'll survive this pretty well. We have a lot of systems in place to deal with it, the peer review process, the journals that are pretty much gatekeepers for reasonable information. It reduces the noise that you have to put up with otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
I guess maybe it is the risk to democracy, but it probably is deeper than that.
Mm-hmm.
I think the erosion of trust is probably the greatest harm and potential more harm coming down the pike. If humans generally trust each other, a lot more is possible to be accomplished than if they don't trust each other. And there's been an enormous harmful fad of distrust amongst people that should otherwise be trusting each other. And, you know, the consequences of trusting and being disappointed
Mm-hmm.
by somebody misbehaving, I think are much less than the generic and general distrust of other people. Some people deserve to be distrusted. They have behaved N times in a row. I mean, it's the fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me, or something. I'm
Uh-huh.
willing to be fooled twice, three
Mm-hmm.
times, maybe four. If it's a family member or another friend, maybe four or five. At some point, yeah,
Yeah.
gotta do something about that. But in the political realm, we expect disinformation.
Mm-hmm.
And yet the technological amplification of that disinformation, I think, is making both the system fail and the general distrust of people, of authority and systems, institutions,
Mm-hmm.
that is very dangerous. I mean, I remember a relative of mine went to Somalia in 1990 something or other. And when she came back, she told me a little bit. She's a beautiful country, absolutely beautiful. And she said all these wonderful things about Somalia. And she
Mhm.
said, yet there's no government there. It is total chaos, run by a bunch of sects and warlords and whatever. The general people suffer enormously from not having some institution of government and laws that
Mhm.
govern things. So, like, if you, I don't know, I'll just make up an example. If you drove down the highway and it didn't
Mhm.
have a speed limit sign, and yet authority figures were allowed to pull you over and say, you know, you were going 25 miles an hour, and you go, it's a highway. And you go, yeah, but I feel like 25 miles an hour is too fast. So here's a ticket, or I'll put you in jail.
Uh-huh.
Okay, you decide that arbitrariness of the authorities
Mhm.
makes it not worth driving on that highway.
Mm.
But to make this analogy, to try to connect this analogy, if you enter a career like science and
Mhm.
you think, if I work hard and I'm smart and I'm lucky and I jump through the hoops, there'll be a career for me and I'll be satisfied and bring home a reasonable paycheck and feed my kids and so on. That's a pretty good system that's worked
Yeah.
for a long time. If something interrupts that bargain that you expect,
Mhm.
uh, you might not enter that. You might not drive on that highway because it is too arbitrary. So this distrust of institutions is dangerous. It's
Mhm.
dangerous to, I mean, this sounds pretty dramatic, and it is. It's dangerous to society. It's dangerous to our survival as an
Mhm.
ecosystem. Uh, People gotta get into groups, bigger and bigger groups, to do bigger and bigger problems.
Mhm.
And they need leaders that they can trust. And that erosion of trust is going to make things hard to do.
Mhm.
I hope that wasn't too abstract.
No, yeah.
I'm certainly not an authority on this. And you certainly, I hope you continue this series and maybe get some real experts to wax more eruditely than I have done.
Oh, yeah. That was really interesting. I think that pretty much covers everything. So just to like wrap this up, do you have any advice for like people and especially like teens?
I do. I would advise you to find role models that
Mm-hmm.
you can aspire to.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I mean, I I'm not joking when I say this. I'm very serious
Mm-hmm.
about my role models.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I know people are going to laugh when they hear this, but my role model is my dog. My dog is a wonderful person. He's not really a person, but
Mm-hmm.
he judges people not at all by how they look, whether they're old or young, black or white. If they're mean to him, yeah, he's going to back off and go, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But he mostly loves everybody and is friendly to them and tries to see how he can make them happy. And he trusts them, even probably when they don't deserve to be trusted. And he lives a pretty simple life. Give him some food, give him some shelter, give him some love. That's what he wants. And we all would benefit from a role model like
Uh-huh.
that. If you had to, if I had to pick a human, I would say last year I saw that the U.S. President Biden appointed Presidential Council of Science Advisors. There were about 30 people, and you
Mm-hmm.
can find their names somewhere on the web.
Mm-hmm.
That is a group of people that are so accomplished in science in their respective fields.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my goodness, is that inspirational to see. Just pick any random one, Google their name, do a little research. Wow. I'll never do anything even close to what they've done. And so they were an inspiration to try harder, to accomplish more. Wonderful. And that probably, being humans, they got their own foibles, they got their own problems and whatever else.
Mhm.
I think my advice to you and other high schoolers is maintain hope, even in the face of what seems like truly hopeless situations facing you.
Mhm.
And well, okay, there is a little life experience I can give you. I don't know if it's applicable, but maybe it is. When I was your age, very learned people, experts in the field, claimed that there was about a 10% probability that we would experience nuclear annihilation from the USSR and the United States. 10%, I don't know, within the next decade or something like that. And I'm like 18. And they're telling me that there's a 10% chance within a decade. Well, I can do the math. That means another decade, another decade. This is bad.
Mhm.
Very demoralizing and depressing. But before that decade was out, a solution that I had not at all anticipated happened. And the threat of the USSR and the United States creating a global nuclear war went away, in the sense the USSR went away. Now the threat hasn't gone away, but it at least is not as omnipresent as it was when I was growing up.
Mhm.
So maybe some of these terrible things that you're facing
Mhm.
will get solved. So don't give up hope. And even if they don't get solved, at least you'll go down swinging. You'll go down living a good life,
Uh-huh.
trying your hardest to contribute something good to the world. And maybe we're all doomed, but maybe it won't happen on our watch. That'll be your grandchildren or great grandchildren or something like that.
Mhm. Yeah, thank you so much for that.
Thank you for the opportunity to help out a little bit. I
Yeah,
won't be
for
here
sure.
forever. You guys take over, please. Do a good job. Mean
Mhm.
well. Your intent is important.
Mhm.
That's another thing that relates to trust. It's become fashionable these days to say intent doesn't matter, only impact. Well, that's hogwash.
Mhm.
Intent matters enormously in so many ways, in so many things.
Mhm.
Anybody tells you that, take it with a grain of salt. They might mean well. They probably do mean well, but they are setting up a situation of enormous harm when they claim that intent doesn't matter. Intent matters a lot.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
intend well. Sometimes you're going to step on somebody's toe, say, I'm sorry,
Uh-huh.
and move on. Keep doing
Yeah.
good things.
Mhm. All right. Thank you so much.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Bye bye.
Have a great rest of your day.
You too. All right. Bye bye.
Yeah. Bye.